Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello. This is Sue Rose Minahan, and this is Talk Cosmos, September 28th. 2019, and we're just beginning, well, we have already begun, the Libra archetype. And it started on the 23rd, and with the autumnal equinox, which happens, it's an astronomical event that occurs twice a year, and it happened to be in Pacific Northwest time just a few minutes after midnight, 12:51. Some say 12:52, but right then. And of course, earlier it would have been on the East Coast, it would be at 3:51. The equinox is when approximately the light, this is just astronomically speaking, just to update people, it's when the light in the day and night is approximately the same length. And the sun rays in the northern hemisphere above the equator the sun is lowering, and so night comes sooner, and in the south, spring is about to begin. So, of course, depending on where you are in the globe, it has a different experience. We're speaking from Seattle, Washington, and of course, we're in the northern hemisphere. But it is caused by our Earth tilt, because the axis, the north and south pole, are 23.5 degrees on a slant, which many of you may know. But this makes for all our seasons, and it also makes for this time when, depending on how we orbit around the sun, the Earth that is, the sun is, we're either closer or further away from the sun. But at this particular time, we have approximately the same light. And the name comes from Latin of equal and nox of night. It's a phenomena that has been since ancient times, and that will rather relate to our conversation today. The ancients, so attuned to nature, were outside and clocked themselves by the seasons and the light of the day and night. And in many, many places of Earth have many, many monuments. One is down in Machu Picchu, and they have a big stone, which, this is a little challenging how to say it. I could probably spell it better, but it's Inti Alana, and it means hitching post of the sun. So it tracks the sun throughout the year. It's just one indication, but there's many. There's caves, there's Stonehenge, etc. So of course the Earth continues to move around the sun, and this season, nothing is stationary. It changes quickly. So yet it is a very ceremonial time. And to help really understand this, there's our wonderful guest today is Jane DeForest from, I believe, Portland. That's where she's active, and she may live just outside of it, but not too far here from Seattle. And Jane is astonishing. She's a professional artist of quite renown. Her paintings are treasured by notable people. According to her, the testimonial of her great insights she's able to capture. She's an author. She wrote this marvelous book, which has numerous awards. Love Never Dies. A psychic artist illustrates true stories of the afterlife. And it's telling. It's a marvelous book of many accounts with wonderful illustrations, too. And so Jane DeForest is a Reiki master, besides being an author and artist, an intuitive and coach. She coaches intuitiveness, a teacher, an animal communicator, and medium. And her studies have been with countless folks, one in particular, Lakota shaman, a Buddhist meditation teacher. She's also a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design, and she journeys. She goes to sacred sites, whether they be in Peru, Bali, Sedona, and Egypt. And her clientele is international. They're on a personal and a business basis. So, and besides this too, I want to add that Jane does pro bono volunteer work. She facilitates communication for special needs children and has a special Ecuador project, Save the Bees, near and dear to my heart too, and is a director of Portland's International Association Near Death Studies, IANDS, which besides her website you can locate. And of course, you can find Jane if lost to how do I find this marvelous person. Go to Talk Cosmos. There on the bio, we have all of her contacts, which happens to be janeinspiration.com, I believe, because I also have a Gmail. Yes, janeinspiration.com. Well, I am just really happy. Hi, Jane. This is a real pleasure.
Well, thank you, Susan. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate your invitation.
Yes. Well, meeting you has been quite instrumental for myself. I think just your energy has connected me with local medium and crystal shop and wonderful metaphysical energies that I search for, but I don't always come in contact with. But this particular subject, I know we had several subjects on the platter, our platter at first, because you also do extraordinary work with chakras, which initially we may even touch on, but because it is the equinox, and I know you've done a wonderful talk in Portland at the Renaissance. I don't know if I wrote the name down, but the Renaissance Bookshop in Portland about the equinox, and that it's a time. Your title was a release, an inward time to be grateful for. So perhaps you'd like to start in any fashion about what you feel these energies are sharing for us to really work with.
Sure, you bet, Susan. Thank you for that intro. That's excellent. I typically present on solstice and equinox in my community, which is the greater Portland, Oregon area. And I think it's important on a macro scale because not only are these ancient times where our ancestors celebrated and also did important prayer work, it also has a scientific importance. So in this presentation, in my presentation and in our discussion today, I hope to present the idea that there is a scientific explanation for why this is an important time and why it's also was spiritually significant to our ancient ancestors and I believe embedded in our DNA.
Beautiful.
But we are, unfortunately, have forgotten this, and it is not an integral part of our education. It's pretty fringe. So I've sort of taken it upon myself to learn about it, to research it, and to also visit some of the important places where our ancient religions centered around these time periods. I recently returned from a trip to Eleusis in Greece, which is outside of Athens, and was the epicenter for the ancient mysteries for several millennia, and did some intuitive work there. And I can talk a little bit about that. Also ancient Egypt, where it said that the ancient mysteries originated. But I think within this is also a power that we can harness and that we can focus our prayer work and our manifesting work at this time for beneficial outcomes. So I think there's a practical application.
It's so important. I like this, to be able to ground it within, because each of us is part of this whole network of energy, like a bee colony, actually, and we all have a part. So, and I'm fascinated. I know that the mysteries, which again relate to, well, it relates to Virgo's Ceres and Persephone, and it also, with this talk, I think of Inanna and Venus, which isn't really the mysteries, but yet her also underworld experience.
That's very insightful. Absolutely. We're looking at the end of Virgo and going into Libra and you mentioned Persephone and Demeter or Kore. So these are ancient names that apply to not only goddesses and gods, but energies, because there's certainly different schools of thought. And I'm as someone who presents ideas for people to consider. I'm not a fundamentalist anything, so I don't really have an attachment to how people interpret it. But I think I think people are very, very intelligent, and they'll apply their own understanding to it. But absolutely, this is a time of year when the ancients entered the underworld. Also, if you look at the astrological chart, it is the time of the inside, of the nighttime, of the moon, of the goddess. Those are all archetypes. When you talked in the beginning about the mind like a hive, like a bee, I think that's you've grasped my central idea, and I think it's very intuitive of you because we haven't discussed this. But the underlying message is that I believe this is an indication of our oneness,
Mm-hmm.
of our hive mind, that we are all an integral part of the whole, and that our consciousness is both individuated but also affecting the collective. So that's a little out there, but
No, I
I can.
agree. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So just to jump in, would you like me to just jump
Yes,
in a little
sure.
bit? Okay, you bet.
Yay.
So, yeah, New Renaissance Bookshop in Portland is my professional home in Portland, and also a sponsor to many of my presentations. So just a little plug for them on 23rd. They're a great place. So what's important on a deep and on a sort of superficial level about this time of year is it's the time of the harvest. It's the harvest goddess. It is abundance collected, so we can preserve it for sustenance over the long winter months. And it is also the time of Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving is a month away, but it's this time period, and it was often celebrated at this juncture in ancient times. And also throughout the Middle Ages, this is the time of thanks. So gratitude being a powerful, powerful directive. So entering the underworld, entering the cycle of death, is symbolically a time of letting go of what no longer serves us. What are we carrying that is costing us life force pranic energy to sustain? Hatred, resentment, animosity, acrimony, jealousy, wounds, old hurts, all these things, although absolutely justified. I certainly know I feel very justified in my holding grudges or something against someone, because of course I'm right. The truth is that is expensive energetically. So that's realizing that, of course, is the first step. So what do you do about it? Well, it's in this quarter of the solar year, and also reflecting to the lunar year. All these cycles were originally recognized in our ancient times from a solar perspective, and then later from a lunar perspective, and then later from a solar perspective. So you'll see the moon gods and goddesses, primarily goddesses, are of the most ancient times, and then came the sun gods, the solar gods.
Yes.
But in this final quarter, which applies now to the solar, we're talking about a solar cycle, it is the death cycle. It is the time when the goddess was abducted, the maiden was abducted by Pluto, the god Pluto, and taken to the underworld called Hades in the ancient myth. And she was ripped away from her mother. her mother known as by many different names, but really Mother Earth. Often this myth is identified as an Earth-centric myth, that it is the explanation of why the seasons die, and they had it in a mythical form. But I think there's so much importance at this time that can easily be dismissed as primitive Earth myth
Yes.
that I just want to present that, but I think there's so much more to it, and that's just what has been my inkling and my fascination, and so I've spent much time researching and journeying to these places to bring back, in the way that the maiden brought back the information from the underworld. So in a way, I'm sort of acting out the myth in a dramatic way. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful. And I agree. I think the mythology, which has always fascinated me since a young person, and thankfully now with more of a spiritual overlay of dimension, knowing that we are a spirit in a body, it's that language, that poetic, you can call it poetic, allegory, however, but yet it's the coded language that shared deep psychic information. We are psychic, and so it's so important. I agree. And I was just thinking about, as a comment about the negative that we might have it as attachments, that when you speak of how expensive, which is a great way of defining this energy, because essentially it's because anything has its finite, energy has a certain length of energy, but the negative really only works within ourselves and eats away at ourselves, and it without a resolution to build on that really has lasting value. So I think the importance, like, of Inanna or of Persephone, which in her story, there isn't so much of, okay, so she returns to Earth to have nurturing, but still it's that moment of solitude, of reflection. So
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying is really important, and that these myths are crumbs that have been left behind, and unfortunately in our society forgotten, to direct us to the truth. Now, as you mentioned before, we've got the equinoxes are equal, and as you mentioned, it's based and looking at the etymology is really important. Like, what are the words and the roots of these words telling us? It is what's completely equal. It is the time when dark and light are completely balanced. In the spring, it's considered sacred marriage. It's about sex, procreation, about Genesis. And it's in the fall, it's a completely different marriage of equals. In the ancient times, it's believed that the double cross, the double axe, which I saw in the ancient Cretan cultures, big giant double axes, by the way, as if they must have had a much taller race. And in my own meditations, I came to that understanding, but that's a little, that goes off on a different topic. But what we've got here is a cycle. And the game, I believe, part of what's being hidden in these myths is a truth that is hidden in the Ouroboros, or the circle of the snake eating its own tail, an ancient symbol that tells us, as these cycles of fall equinox, winter solstice, spring equinox, summer solstice, again, fall equinox, this is the cyclical nature of the calendar that we don't get a sense of in the Gregorian calendar, and mirrors this Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. Well, what does this mean? Well, you think of it, you think of future generations. I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and things have been lost from my grandmother to my children, and that's just several generations. I wish I'd paid more attention to what my grandmother told me. I only have a bit to pass on to my daughters. I think of my great 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 grandchildren. What will be left of the wisdom that I've passed on? If there's been any kind of a disruption in the culture, um, which certainly happens historically repeatedly, information and wisdom is lost. And that may be why the ancients buried scrolls and also hid information in architecture, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But I believe that these symbols are messages from our ancient past to tell us the core truths that can help us live a more meaningful life. And I believe what these symbols are telling us is that we are eternal. And as we die in this last quarter, we die to our ego self. And being born again at Christmas as the birth of the light, the birth of Jesus is symbolic of that. We have a lot of births of sons of God, 30 odd of them by virgins, by the way. This is a historical fact. This is in no way meaning to be dishonoring of the Christian tradition. I'm merely reporting history.
Yes.
So, and I think to approach this, we have to consider suspending disbelief, or as Master Yoda says, you must unlearn what you have learned.
Yes. Decondition.
we have learned that matter, the superstition of materialism, that solid thing, matter is solid. Of course, we understand with physics that's 100 years old that in fact it's 1% matter and 99% energy buzzing around fast enough for us to perceive it as solid, and we perceive ourselves as separate, but we're all cutting edge science, or even 100-year-old science tells us we're also a wave. So it's important to at least, with this presentation, I invite the listener to not necessarily believe what I'm saying, but to suspend disbelief and hold this information with an open hand and an open mind. So I invite that. But we live in a really big universe. We live in a vast expanse of universe that's traveling through our solar system, moves through space at 70,000 kilometers an hour. So we're booking through space. And sometimes I think it's very easy to perceive us as, static, and that time travels in one arrow from the past to the future. But in fact, it seems that we're entangled. That includes time. And I wonder if the ancients didn't know that. But what science tells us about this time of year is that the Earth's magnetic field has anomalies at 2 times of year. Those are at spring and fall equinox. Isn't that interesting?
It is.
Yeah. So the research that I did, the UCLA astrophysicists say that the aurora borealis, those substorms, they've long puzzled space physicists, and they erupt with little warning and shocking intensity in these 2 times of year. Isn't that interesting?
Well,
and it's a mystery to these brilliant physicists. And that's what causes our beautiful aurora borealis.
Well, the energy cycle, we understand electromagnetic and gravity. So far, we don't have one huge formula for both of them. Well, Jane, this is already lots of seeds of thought. And for our audience sake, we will return very shortly. This is with Jane DeForest. This is Libra archetype for the equinox. And today is, and I didn't say, well, it is September 28th, but this is also repeated on October 3rd. So if you're listening at 6 o'clock in the morning, you will also enjoy. We will be right back. Thank you. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Libra, ruled dually by Venus. By leaving the lower hemisphere of the self, the energy of Libra enters the arena where the completed self meets the other than self to form a relationship based on partnership. As a cardinal air sign on the descendant angle, represented by the equinox of equal light, Libra's energy learns through comparison and relationships, with the intention to integrate duality and polarities.
In addition to today's program, intuitive coach and psychic medium Jane DeForest, the director of the Portland International Association for Near-Death Studies and author of the book Love Never Dies, will be appearing at Seattle's East West Bookshop on Friday, October 11th for intuitive art readings from 11 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. and presenting a Sunday class on the 13th from 1 to 3 p.m. Tickets are still available for purchase and can be purchased in person at East West Bookshop. For more information, call 206-523-3726.
Greetings, this is Ben Mabry, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness, consciousness, and superconsciousness.
Find our app in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and take us with you wherever you go. Alternative Talk AM 1150.
Hi again. Greetings. Sue Rose Minahan with Jane DeForest from Oregon. And we're talking about the equinox that occurred on the 23rd of September. Today is the 28th, and we're repeating on the October 3rd in the morning. And the conversation has several highlights that I have jotted down that somehow I would like to bring out. That's so exciting to me. I love the Ouroboros. You know, it's this wonderful ancient diagram of the serpent, as Jane has said, eating its tail of, and it really goes back to so many legend. Well, Hermes and his caduceus and and then the mysteries of Greece. The idea of being reborn is certainly, and if you're going to get reborn for the solstice, of course, we need to let go. And there is that total process. Autumn, no matter if it's above or below the equator, drops the leaves, of course, and that. So if you could bring out some insights that you felt that you could share, because the audience is a wide mix, but basically people here are very fascinated with the archetypes of astrology, and so there's I think you have a willing ear, and if you could share what you felt about in Greece with the oracle, because that would be fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And Susan, we're definitely connected, because I during the break skipped ahead from my slide presentation, which is available. It will be available on the link or the PowerPoint in a more modern way of putting it. And I had skipped the part about how I feel that this ancient time is a portal because of the electromagnetic anomalies, and why I think that. And I'm going to skip ahead to Eleusis to talk a little bit about how I believe the ancients utilized that portal.
Oh, beautiful.
And in my recent visit, I was stunned at a couple of things. First of all, what was at Eleusis, and it was markedly empty. My visit to the Acropolis was swimming through a sea of international tourists, all wearing different kinds of clothes and speaking different languages, and you had to, elbow your way to the Parthenon and so forth. And at Eleusis, there was nobody. A small group of academics arrived after my daughter and I did, but it is a mystery to this day, and people don't know a lot about it because it's not common knowledge. So for millennium, they've got architectural objects that go back to the 17th millennium BC at this particular location where there was a well. And many times where there's a well, geographically, it is considered a sacred space, if not opening it up. In these sacred places, I will interject, do have specific energies. The ancients were not morons, and they didn't just arbitrarily put these at random places. If you step back from a higher vantage point, you can see that these are almost equidistant and create a web or acupuncture points that connect a ley line system around the planet. That's a little bit of a different topic, but I just want to say that to introduce the idea that this particular place was ancient, was spiritually significant. It was a religious epicenter for thousands and thousands of years. Why? And that's an important question to ask. It was, from our recollection, the most documentation we have is from ancient Greece. It was when the Romans took over, occupied Greece, and it became the Roman Empire. It then, Eleusis Mystery School became run by the Roman government. So it was a government provided spiritual experience. People could only go there once, in the same way people trek to pilgrims trek to Mecca, or they trek to Santiago de Compostela. This was a place for people, spiritual pilgrims, to travel to. My daughter and I made sure that we didn't walk it. Typically, how it was done, the major mysteries took place at one time of year, and that was fall equinox. And the religious collected at the Acropolis before dawn, and as the sun was rising, they left on their trek, stopping along the way to make offerings to the great goddess. And as an aside, one of the things they offered were sculptures of doves. Mm-hmm. So Sophia, the great goddess, by many names, including Athena, was honored by the dove, which we see later as the Holy Spirit. So this symbolism goes way back. And we took the bus, and I'll tell you, the ancient olive groves are now filthy industrial complexes. And this sacred it was called the Sacred Path. The Sacred Path is now a concrete, not a jungle, but it's a bit of a wasteland. There's lots of industry there, and you can see the encroachment of modern consciousness in the pollute the environment and disconnection to the divine in tangible terms. But anyway, we got to this place, and I had the place to ourselves. We did meditation there, and my research told me, and you can see remnants of this in the bas-reliefs of the architecture, there are shafts of wheat. Well, we don't know a lot about the ancient mysteries, but we do know that there was a dramatic play about the goddess descending into the underworld, and who will emerge, by the way, spring equinox. Although in some ancient cultures, it was emerging at winter solstice. So this symbolism of going down was dramatically shown to the people who were spiritual seekers, and they drank something. We know that from the Testament, but not much is known, because the secrets, if they were divulged, would be punishable by death. So people were not so likely to share what went on.
No.
there was in 408 40. I might have my dates wrong, but there was a scandal in Roman times, so I think it was about 40 A.D., about someone who served the mysteries at dinner, which I think gave rise to a whole bunch of research, which I can't take credit for, except that I have been fascinated by. And there is a smut or mushroom fungus that grows on barley and on rye that's called ergot. And ergot is a hallucinogenic fungus, which incidentally, if you've heard of Dr. Abby Hoffman, was ergot was synthesized by Dr. Hoffman in the 30s and to what we know as LSD. So it's believed that people who were required to fast, anybody could do this, by the way, women, slaves, free men, and foreigners. The requirements were that they had to speak Greek, they had to not have committed arson or murder, and they arrived fast and required to have fasted for some time and watched the dramatic play and some other things. They descended into a room called the Telestrion, which I have in my slide presentation, a facsimile of what it looked like, and then a picture of what it looks like now that I took. And people would enter this room and drink this brew. And upon leaving, the reports say that they would exclaim that they had epiphanies, they were able to see a light that was all knowledge and love, that they were able to understand the gods. So certainly, although they parallel people who have had psychedelic experiences or potentially near-death experiences, but what this really was a born-again experience where they died to the physical ego self and were born of the spiritual self.
Yes.
Which I believe is the symbolism of the Ouroboros. Not that we need to physically die, but that we need to die to our base urges of lust, envy, greed, primitive egocentric ideas, me-centered, I'm special kind of.
Over somebody else, yes.
And then connect to the hive mind or we are part of something greater, we are interconnected, or we are one. Or if you're a Buddhist monk for 20 years, you come to understand that you are God. Of course, that's really considered heresy in many circles, but
it's a matter of language, yes.
But it is the language of the mystic, of the person
Yes.
that understands that they are an awakened soul. And I'm throwing out different verbiage for the same thing because I think it's helpful not to concretize it.
Well, I'm so glad. I also listened to Richard Tarnas at NORWAC one year, a couple of years back. And NORWAC, for our audience sake, outside of Seattle, and many people are attending now, is the Northwest Astrological Conference. And this is where I met Jane also this year. And he wrote Psyche and oh my goodness, everybody. Cosmos and Psyche, right? Or Psyche and Cosmos, one or the other. I mean, it's whichever way. And began his studies as a young man because he works down in San Francisco. I don't mean to be humming and hawing here, but in San Francisco at the school and teaches. So these were early studies as a young, I guess, student professor and all of that. And it was with the LSD and interest, and it also brought in his interest with astrology because he noticed it depending on different times of the month, and he was outside letting people in, that he could see the moon coming up, and must have been someplace other than Seattle where you can see the moon a lot, and throughout the year, and that people would have these different experiences, and generally it was said in this speech that if we were a society that would honor the unseen. I'll put it that way because I'm just remembering his essence of what he said. That people would have, those people that had difficult experiences would not have had them, because it is in our consciousness of what we want, illuminated. But what I find fascinating, Jane, here is that Rome, which had such a, it is that link, I suppose, between the very ancient times and the more modern times. But they allowed that not only did the government, that it was the people of authority deemed this to be such an importance, but that it was open to everybody, women, slaves, foreign people, and with a few qualifications, one of which is do no harm to other people, through murder and burning, which is just extraordinary.
Yeah, I think that's important that you noted that. I think that's really true. Rome is the link, at least for we in the West, that from the ancient world to the modern. Now, everything fell apart and was destroyed, third, fourth century when the Roman Empire was invaded by the Goths and the Visigoths, and then became a Christian. The cult of Christianity grew from the what we call the after Christ, and it grew till about the 300s into in 325 AD. The Council of Nicaea was held by Constantine, and Christianity was mandatory. It was a state religion. So it was illegal to exercise and practice the mysteries, and the ancient gods became against the state, as opposed to Theodosius, who made Christianity an option. So things changed drastically, and the personal relationship with the divine was interceded by the priest. You had to get you couldn't go directly to the divine. You had to pray to the priest or talk to the priest who'd be an intermediary.
It fascinates that from the extremely ancient, because when the timeline is like way back, maybe prior, like Neolithic, a long time, where the unity of nature and of the more, because I was just listening on the great courses my husband's watching, the big history, and so it goes back from this man Craig Benjamin from Australia, and takes it from Neolithic up till and this time that you're talking about. But the point that I'm thinking is that the Greeks actually stopped their mythology from being with the animals. Their gods and goddesses were like people. And then here now, with the demise of the Romans through these invaders, which I learned actually is just a matter of the world moving from east to west across big spans of time, or spaces rather. And now it is a further fragmentation, is the point, from the So one wonders, well, okay, we're perhaps then, if there is any reason for this, it's a matter of consciousness as far as other parts of civilization and growth and ability, but we're on this return basis now of really, as you say, reconnecting. There's this interest with more and more folks through and astrologers, and then wonderful people such as yourself that are so in tune to remind us.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important way to end, to start preparing for the end of the show is, yes, in a sense, we've become religiously removed from our intimate connection with the divine through sort of the dogma of religion. Because I think religion has an important place for organizing people. But I do think it's caused a separation, in practical terms and also consciously. So what I perceive is happening today from my work as an intuitive and working directly with people individually, also looking at the big picture, but being on the ground, boots on the street kind of thing, feet on the street. And professionally, I'm merging with someone's consciousness. I'm finding out what their spiritual path is and helping. I'm not the moon. I say I'm the finger pointing at the moon. So what I do see is that there is a disillusionment with organized religion, but yet materialism doesn't fill that the gap that loss of religion creates. As a matter of fact, it causes a lot of confusion, unhappiness, and yearning for true meaning. I think astrology helps a lot in being a sort of an archetypal map for figuring out what that is. But the relationship to your personal idea of the divine can't be replaced by anything else but your personal relationship to the divine. Everything else is sort of a finger pointing to it. And what I see is an awakening. I would say we're right in the middle of a renaissance.
Ooh.
Now, most renaissances happen at the back end of a golden age. So I do think we're, from my investigations in talking to all different kinds of non-human entities like trees and animals and Mother Earth herself, it's pretty clear to me that we're heading into an ecological disaster. When I do my visions in remote viewing into future situations, I see that there are parts of the earth that we can't live on in several dozen generations, and that we live possibly in domed areas, but that's a little vague because I do believe that the future is malleable. So hopefully in this awakening moment, we can turn that around. And I think a lot of people are feeling that urgency, and some people are feeling a desperation because they don't know what to do.
Well, that gets it gets right back then to the beginning of this, saying that there are times to borrow from ancestral, however we want to look at it, whether it's, but the fact is right now bringing up the point that this is a sacred time. It's of, and sacred in the sense of the light, that it has some balance of equality, that because it's so interactive, whether it's lunar, solar, or whether it's male, masculine, feminine, night, day, all of these, however people want to refer regeneration. So to go within, and gratitude again and again with so many metaphysically in today's world is brought, that brings, to be grateful brings abundance. And I guess the with your talk that you did, that will be somehow, we were saying, will be attached to either the event on the, which is very kind of you and thank you, on Talk Cosmos page or in your bio area. I'm not sure how my computer person will do it, but you will help me. But the point is that the gratitude is fundamental, and ancients knew it, and now it's like, I guess it recognizes, and what we feel and see, we manifest.
Yeah, exactly. And how I see people who are grateful, when I look at them energetically, if you want to liken someone's pranic or their chakra energy, their energy of who they are, their biofield, to put a scientific label on it, people who are grateful, if you were to liken that to a plant, are a very vital plant with green leaves that produce beautiful flowers and fruit. Someone who's holding on to the negativity that we talked about at the beginning of the lecture is a plant that might be, infested by aphids, or is dying back, or is half the size of a plant that's steeped in gratitude. So it isn't as much. Yes, it's a good thing to do, and now's a perfect time to plant that idea because of the time of year and because of the electromagnetic field. I believe amplifies it, but it's really good for your health. But to bring it home into a personal realm, what we did for a ceremony, and ceremony is important. It is a way of merging the physical and the spiritual. And there's pretty universal, if you look at it, East, West, ancient, modern, there's pretty universal elements to a ceremony. There's purification. So what we did is we ohmed. Om. And we ohmed for several minutes together. You don't need to be in a collective. You could be by yourself, but you're purifying yourself. And purification is the first step in any ceremony, to take yourself out of the workaday world and to the spiritual realm. I then had people draw, and I have created a handout, which I'll also give you a PDF, and people can print for free, no problem, and no copyright, so you can share. I really think I'm doing more and more no copyright. I just think it's important. And I had people draw what they were releasing and on one page, and what they were grateful for the other. And people could draw their hatred in red crayon, or they could draw the person that they resent or they're envious of. I mean, these are all human emotions, and they're nothing to be ashamed of. But we don't want to identify with them. We had everybody share, if they wanted, what they wanted to release into the circle verbally, and then everybody ripped up what they drew and left it in a pile in the middle of the room. We closed it with purification and sound, as if sending it up the portal and out at this important time of year with the elevated electromagnetic field. Possibly we'd created a portal. We were a circle. Why not? And we ohmed.
Boy, I love it. Oh,
for
Jane.
several minutes afterwards, and that's a simple ceremony.
Oh, this special, very special. I'm going to just take a little moment here and remind people that, and we'll go right back to this, because to have a ceremony that is an act, it gives us that participation, and it's like poetry or music. It's beyond us. It factors in things that we don't need to understand. We just use electricity and it works. But next week will be the Cosmic Collaboration, and I have adapted it. We're on the upper hemisphere, and instead of individual commentaries, it's going to be a live panel. And it'll be with two astrologers perhaps some of you are familiar with. They're here in Seattle because it's in Seattle. Is Shannon Hayes, who's an evolutionary astrologer and a stargazer and nature lover activist, and Amanda Pierce, who's also an astrologer of eclectic energy interest, and a psychology degree, and both of them are on various talks. But that will be next Saturday, the 28th, for Libra, and we'll be talking about quincunx, which is another part of relationships, because everything I'm going to return now with Jane DeForest, who has been having this wonderful talk about Equinox, and I think ceremonies is how we can participate in a relationship with the unseen in the world. Would you say we have about 3 minutes here? We can, but I love this, Jane. That's so great.
Yeah, I love this too, and it's just an honor to speak to you, Susan. And I'm so grateful to be invited to your exquisite show that's sharing ancient knowledge that on some level we remember. So we're just reminding people. And I'm very appreciative to have the opportunity to share this ancient wisdom. It's so important to me that I've spent a lot of time and resources in researching it so that I can share it in a concise and sort of sound bites kind of way, because we live in that kind of world. So we don't have the time to go on a year's sabbatical typically. So
but we
I'm
do,
grateful.
But we are, as you going back, your beehive idea, which again, we need the bees, and I hope people do look into both your, I think your sites are Jane's inspiration, and IANDS about near death, but the Ecuador project and the bees. Because if we're all unified, which we are, it doesn't mean we have the same amount of water that we need for our plant or the same altitude, but we all need sunshine, and we need some dirt, and we need some water, and we're united. So having this link, you sharing and us hearing and connecting, it matters. It's wonderful.
It is wonderful. So thank you so much.
Okay. Well, then very wonderful. This show will be repeated on Thursday, October 3rd, and today is the 28th, but the equinox, remember, was on the 23rd at 51 minutes after midnight. Thank you, fantastic guests and audience. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.